Hi everyone, my name is Dan Cauchy. I'm the General Manager responsible for Automotive Grade Linux at Linux Foundation. I'm joined by my colleague, Jan-Simon Möller, who is our guru of all trades for AGL, including release management and a lot of other stuff, including Yocto, our Yocto expert. And Walt Miner, who's our community manager, unfortunately could not be here. He had a family emergency and had to cancel at the last minute. So today, our goals are to educate you on what Automotive Grade Linux is all about, or AGL as we call it, how to access the source code and documentation, and we're here to really generate interest in the developer community, which is you guys, in participating in AGL. There's a lot of cool stuff that we're doing, and the fact that it's going into actual cars pretty soon is really cool, I think. I think this is one of the most exciting projects at Linux Foundation, personally, but I'm a little biased. Okay, introduction to AGL. So I made this quote last year at Automotive Linux Summit in Japan. Basically, if Linux is in the car, we want it all to be based on AGL, no matter what the function. And I've never had more publications pick up a quote like this. It was all over the news. People were really talking about it. And it was really us putting a stake in the ground saying, hey, you know, AGL is for real. We have some real backers, and I'm going to show you our backers in a minute. And the fact that we're going to address every single function in the car, even the functional safety stuff. So I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. So our tagline, and I'm not going to bore you with marketing stuff, but this is a really important point, is collaborating to build a car of the future through rapid innovation. And everyone knows that car manufacturers are very cost sensitive. They're always worried about cost. Every bolt in the car is measured, and the cost of everything is measured. So people often, when they talk to me about AGL, they're like, oh, it's about free software and saving money. It's actually the farthest thing from the truth. And when I talk to the car manufacturers, it's about rapid innovation. So on average, using the old methodology of developing an infotainment system in the dashboard, using the old methodology, which is a 100-year-old supply chain, where an automotive manufacturer gives basically an RFQ, an RFP, a complete requirements document to a supplier and says, give me a black box with some software in it that does these things. Unfortunately, that model, which has been going on forever, on average takes 39 months to produce an infotainment system from scratch. In 39 months, we've had 3 or 4 of these come out, iPhones or Android phones. And the consumer is paying $1,000, $2,000 for an infotainment in a high-end vehicle. It's crazy. And these infotainment systems, they don't do they do 10% of what these phones can do. There's no real app functionality. There's no app store. It's really lacking. There's no over-the-air upgrade. I mean, some of them are starting to do it now, but it's really, really lacking. So the automotive guys really, they know this, and they're concerned, which is why they're backing this concept of AGL, to have one single platform, change the way software is produced for cars, and be more like these, so that you can have a new system every 12 months, or a new upgrade every 6 months if you already have a car with an AGL system. So our charter, AGL is code first. We're a Linux Foundation open collaborative project, obviously. We're leveraging Linux and open source technologies to build this platform. We're building a standardized platform and app framework for the entire industry, and as I mentioned, for every function in the car. We're planning to address infotainment, heads-up display, instrument cluster. Most of the a lot of the new instrument clusters are LCD display these days. Makes a lot of sense. It's a lot of the same requirements as infotainment. We're also planning to address ADAS and advanced driver assistance, and eventually automated driving and functional safety. So we're planning to address all of those functions. It's all part of our charter. And the goal is to develop 80% of the starting point of a production project. So what that means is that, as I mentioned, the old model of giving someone a requirements document and then getting a black box back and then have no software reuse, that model has to end today. And so the goal is, let's build one single infotainment platform, and then one single telematics platform, one single HUD platform. And what these things have is that the kernel, the middleware, the app framework, all of that are common and shared amongst all the manufacturers and suppliers. The other 20% is what they customize. So they skin the system to their look and feel. They add the apps that they want so that, for example, a low-end car has a different set of apps than a high-end car because they want to differentiate and have different pricing levels, that kind of stuff. And that's what we're trying to build, 80% of the starting point of our production project. As I mentioned, AGL is code first, meaning that we do have a specification document, but it's really more of an MRD. So these are the engineers getting together and agreeing on what we want to build, and then we go off and build it and code it. But it's code first, meaning everyone uses the same code. Also part of our charter is that we're working upstream with other projects, so we don't reinvent the wheel. If there's a Bluetooth stack or some other stack that exists out there, chances are we're just going to reuse it. When we make the automotive changes to it, automotive specific stuff, then we just feed those back upstream. That's pretty common. And then finally, we educate the industry in open source collaboration and best practices. And the automotive industry is actually quite far behind other industries. For example, telecom started using Linux and open source some 15 plus years ago, maybe longer. So they're quite educated on best practices, licensing, all these things. The automotive industry, not so much. So there's a lot of education to be done. Their legal departments have to be really educated on trusting this stuff, and this is what we do also. Now, the code is important. I mentioned code first. Code is critical. But even more important, I think, than the actual code is that we're creating a new software development methodology for automotive. The automotive guys have not really used open source and Linux until recently. And this whole supply chain, really, this is what we're changing. And it's very difficult because they're used to doing this and building cars in a certain way and interacting with their suppliers in a certain way. And we're changing all of that by saying, hey, wait a second, Mr. Manufacturer, you're in the software business. First of all, admit that you're in the software business because you're competing against iPhones and Android phones in terms of consumer expectations. So now that you have admitted you're in the software business, you need to start changing the way you build software, meaning you have to have reuse, you have to have this platform, and hence, this is why AGL exists. We're going to change the way consumers interact with the vehicle, the way vehicles interact with other vehicles in terms of safety on the road, and the way vehicles interact with the cloud. These are all part of our charter. In terms of governance, we're structured very much similar to any collab project at Linux Foundation. We have an advisory board. The advisory board is quite lightweight. It doesn't make any technical decisions. It just approves the funds, where the money is going to be spent. It approves things like marketing. It approves things like all member meetings, where those member meetings are going to be, those kinds of things. It's a very administrative kind of function. We have a steering committee. This is where technical decisions get approved, but typically that's not where technical decisions are made. Technical decisions are made on the lower level, meaning the system architecture team and the expert groups. So we have expert groups for different functions, different components in the software stack and the vehicle, and those teams feed up their requirements to the SAT, and the SAT basically makes sure that end-to-end we have consistency in the way we're building things, and we have consistency, for example, in security, which affects the entire system. So that's how we're structured. We also allow expert groups and projects to report directly to the board, but those tend to be more marketing-related or business-related things. These are OEM supporters. We have Ford, Honda, Jaguar Land Rover, Mazda, Mitsubishi Motors, Nissan, Subaru, and Toyota. It's a pretty good list. If you look at the volume of the cars manufactured total by this list, it's quite substantial. We're heavily Japanese focused, as you can tell. That's only a circumstance of where it was started. It was really started and pushed by Toyota initially. So the Japanese ecosystem tends to be the center of gravity at this point. Having said that, we're actually recruiting European OEMs, we're talking to Daimler, Renault, PSA, BMW, all these companies. And we hope that some of them will join in the near future. We have 64 companies total now. We have different levels of participation with different dues. Toyota is a platinum member, as you can see, so is Mazda. They're probably the two companies that are the most advanced in terms of thinking about how they're going to use AGL in production, which is coming very shortly. In fact, Toyota is pretty open publicly in saying that AGL will go in every single one of their cars in the next few years. Every single car at Toyota. So this project is for real. Just a quick marketing slide. Why is AGL important? Well, it's open. We're building a single standard OS and app framework, not under the control of any one company. And I think that's key. And I think you can read into that what I'm trying to say without saying it. It's developed between many companies. It's sharing the development activities on all the common bits. We're decreasing time to market and making sure that we're keeping up with mobile phones. That's our goal, right? To have the same similar functionality, same development cycles as the mobile industry. And then we're creating this ecosystem of AGL-ready suppliers so that everyone is using the same code base, but there's still some differentiation to be had. For example, honestly don't think we're ever going to do navigation. Now, we have navigation as a demo, but navigation tends to be one of those things that is very critical to suppliers, and they have their own solution typically. So that's one example of where they're going to differentiate, and they're going to just port their own navigation system on top of AGL, and that's what the car manufacturer will use. So there's another organization called Geneva Alliance. They've also been working on the concept of open source and Linux for some time. Actually, they existed before AGL. They were primarily started by BMW and their ecosystem. So they're heavily German focused in terms of region. We're different, but we're not enemies. We're actually, AGL and Geneva are collaborating quite closely on several modules where it makes sense. But the key difference is that AGL is a code-first organization that I've said many times now. We're building a complete distro, middleware, and app framework, and OEMs and suppliers use the same software base as the starting point. Whereas Geneva, their approach is a bring-your-own-platform approach. So they have a specification, and any supplier or any company can be compliant to the specification. But you can be compliant with different software bases, different kernel versions, different module versions of anything. So the result is that there's multiple suppliers can be compliant, so there's different starting points. So there's more options in the marketplace, but the downside is there's less interoperability and less reuse. Because if a third party ports to one company's Geneva platform, it may not work on another company's Geneva platform. And to be honest, we think that that's not the right approach. We prefer the open source methodology, which is everyone uses the same platform. So that's the key difference between the two organizations. The other key difference is that AGL, as part of our charter, is we're addressing all the functions in the car, whereas Geneva is really limited to infotainment. That's really the only part of their charter. One platform to rule them all. So in January at CES, Las Vegas, we released the first version of AGL. We called it Unified Codebase, and the reason for that is the industry had three main projects that had open source components. There was AGL, we had some stuff, we had some components. There was Tizen IVI, another project that had some components, and Geneva has some components, audio manager, layer manager, these things. And there was a lot of fragmentation. There was no one platform. So what we said is, let's build one platform and hope the industry adopts it. For AGL members, we're moving forward with our platform. So, that's clear. But we do hope that this unified platform will be adopted by Geneva someday and potentially other projects in the industry. That's our goal, and that's why we called it Unified Codebase. And we want to reduce fragmentation. So this is all based on Yocto Poki, based on specific layers. We have a common IVI layer, And then we have an AGL layer, and Jan Simon will talk about that in his presentation. One of the things that came out of CES is that we did a demo, and the demo was quite successful. So I'm going to show you that demo right now. Hi everyone, welcome to the Automotive Grade Linux demonstration here at CES. What we have here is a Renesas R-Car porter board, and we're simulating HVAC vents here with these actuators and an HVAC fan, and we're going to show you that we're controlling all of that through the software. And over here we have a most ring simulating 2 front speakers, 2 back speakers, and we're going to show you how that integrates with the media player. So now for the actual demo, here we go. First we'll start with navigation. Cancel that. So this is a map of Vegas, and you can select a destination simply by clicking and starting the navigation. And then we also have a simulation of the car driving, as you can see. Again, this is all running Automotive Grade Linux, unified code-based distribution. Okay, here we're going to show you the HVAC control. So if we change the temperature of the driver's side and change the temperature of the passenger side, you'll see that these actuators are now moving based on the temperature control. And also the fan, we can increase the fan, and it might be difficult to see on the video, but then we get the increase in airflow, which is quite substantial right now. Okay, next we'll show you the media player. So this is a media player. We've got some songs chosen here. So let's say Norah Jones, and I'm not sure if it comes out on the video, but now it's playing. This is running the first ever open source MOS driver provided by Microchip. Very good. Pause, switch songs. It's quite responsive, as you can see. Okay. And then we also have a simulated vehicle information, so fuel, speed, tire pressure, obviously simulated right now, but gives you an idea of what it could look like in a vehicle. And that concludes our demo. Thank you very much. Okay. So what's really cool about this demo, first of all, is actually not the software itself. Again, it's about the industry. We got 14 different companies together to work on this thing. And these are arch enemies normally. And it's quite a feat to get these companies in the same room working on software. It's new for them. Now, other industries, that's normal. We've done that for years in open source. But in the automotive industry, it's new, and that's a huge barrier that we broke down. 14 companies worked on this. We got this demo done from scratch in about 5 months. We had nothing in terms of the apps, and in 5 months, we got this done because 14 companies got together. They each took a part, and they all provided some software. The other thing that's cool is this was using real automotive software stacks. So there was a real CAN bus controlling actuators and vents and fans. And then on the other side, there's the first ever MOS open source device driver in the MOS ring for the speakers. And that's a huge achievement as well. That was provided by Microchip. We helped them get that into the Linux kernel, so it's actually in the kernel today. It's upstream. So that MOS device driver now will be there forever. So that's great. AGL releases, so long and thanks for all the fish. A little reference there to Hitchhiker's Guide. We name our releases after fish. It's just a cute thing we do. AA, Agile Albacore, was released in January. BB is Brilliant Blowfish. That's in June. And CC is Charming Chinook, which will be at the end of the year. Brilliant Blowfish, the target date is mid-June. We've upgraded to Yocto 2.0. That's already done, thanks to Jan Simone. We're adding BSPs for NXP and TI. We're working with both companies now. They're helping us do this work. We're adding audio management and layer management, which was not in the demo so far. We're doing some improvements to automated tests. We're adding complete security spec, so this is something that's ongoing. We're writing a spec to determine the overall security framework for the system. We're also going to add demo features. So one of the goals for this release is that we're going to be at Automotive Linux Summit in July in Japan, and we plan to show a demo of this improved Brilliant Blowfish release. So we're going to have multiple audio streams, switching and mixing, hardware accelerated video, navigation improvements. You saw in the demo it was a little jerky. We need some improvements there. And then upgraded automotive simulation, steering wheel controls like audio and things like that, media playing from Bluetooth devices, and AM/FM tuner application, which we didn't have today in that demo. Charming Chinook is scheduled for the end of the year. This is the release we're going to use at CES for our demo there, and we're planning a big presence at CES this year. Apps are going to use the AGL app framework that we're creating now. The AGL compositor. We're going to have a home screen with multi-display support. Device profiles, so we're going to create initially the initial device profiles for telematics, instrument cluster, heads-up display, and eventually ADAS if we get to it in time. Smart Device Link. This is another open source project that basically allows an app on any phone. It doesn't have to be iPhone or Android. It's independent of the actual OS. And it allows any app developer to connect to the car using Smart Device Link. Linux security module, as I mentioned, that's another thing we're working on. And then driver privacy. So as I mentioned, this will be the release that we're doing for CES. So look for some news on that. We're going to do a lot of press and things like that at CES. Okay, so I'd like to hand it over to Jan Simone. He's going to talk about how to get involved in AGL and the infrastructure that we have for development.
Yeah, hello everyone. So next I want to show you, thanks. I want to show you basically what AGL looks like. Here we have the architecture overview, and you see that for the application part, we provide APIs, both native and web-based APIs. And below, that's our basically 80%, as Dan said, what we care about, which is the application framework, which is the services layer. On one side, we have the open source components that we use. On the other side are automotive specifics, like telematics, smart device links, and the automotive bus. So those are parts which come from AGL. And beneath, we have the operating system kernel. You see in blue, that's the parts which kind of AGL takes care about, where we, which we polish and work on. Dan mentioned we use Yocto, Cauchy, and that is the setup of layers that we use. You see we build upon the existing layers of Cauchy and Open Embedded. In between, there is the hardware-specific layer, in that case, Meta Renesas. And on top, we have the layer Meta IVI Common. That's where the collaboration happens. On top, we then have Meta AGL, more specific components, and Meta AGL Demo, which is basically our reference UI implementation. So, show me the code. So, how to get started with AGL? A good starting point is our wiki, wiki.automotivelinux.org. Yeah, it is well structured. You will find the most important information there in about 5 to 6 pages. So we really do our best to keep that. To get started with the services that we use, you will need an account. dev.automotivelinux.org is where you can sign up for it. Most of the discussions happen on the mailing list. So there is the Automotive Discussions mailing list, and you can sign up on the page over there. For IRC, we use the automotive channel on Freenode, which has seen quite some growth in traffic, which is great. And that's where the Geneva and AGL people hang out and exchange their chat on. So what's really impressive to see is that we had a lot of growth in the mailing list and participation. So the automotive discussions, that's our general list. We have separate lists for the steering committee and the SAT. And the traffic nearly doubled on the automotive discussion list, which is great. Subscribers, here is the actual traffic. And although it went down on the steering committee, we had a really tremendous growth on the generic discussions because we moved all discussions over to the public. Yeah, so everything is now happening on the public general mailing list. Now, we are really here to give you an impression of the project and, well, get you to join the project. If you're interested in one of the subsystems, be it one of the open source, one of the automotive subsystems, join us. We are looking for maintainers for this system. We are looking for application developers to use the APIs. We are very inclusive and open. We have a weekly dev call that happens on Tuesdays, 13 UTC, and that's where all the developers meet. We talk through the topics, make sure everyone is on the same page, and everyone can dial in and speak up. As bug tracker, we use Jira, and there's jira.automotivelinux.org, where you can look at the open issues, where you can find what's going on. The contribution process is documented on this wiki page, and yes, it fits on one single wiki page. So it's no 500-page document. No, it's easy. Account, set up your Jira, your Gerrit, and you're good to go. For the code, we use Jira as many projects do. So you will find the code all here, git automotivelinux.org. And we use Gerrit for the code review process. So each sub-project that we host or each repository that we host will be reviewed by a group of people, usual open source methodologies. So there's nothing special about that. So where's the code? Basically, we have 3 places in Git and Gerrit. We have AGL, which is mostly all the Yocto layers, which the open embedded layers. So there you will find basically the quote-unquote distribution. Yeah, so that is the recipes, the meta files. We have a folder source that will host all the components that AGL hosts. For example, that can be smart device link, or that could be some telematic stuff. So specifics to AGL. Because remember, code first, upstream first. So if the project already exists, we won't duplicate it. Doesn't make sense. We have staging. Staging is where we work on additional features. So we can have an existing project in there, well, where we play on code before it goes upstream. Yeah, so that's our working staging area. And that's all described on the single page contributing in the wiki. So to keep everything going and smooth, we use Jenkins for CI builds. So every change that's submitted in Gerrit will be built and will be tested. So we get at least an automated test which says, well, it builds. Later on, we will add more and more tests. That's the goal. One of these tests is the so-called JTA, which is a framework also built around Jenkins, but it executes a battery of additional tests. For example, benchmarks, tests like LTP, and so on. So we'll get more and more test coverage as we go. The goal is that you as developer see early, yes, it works, it's good to go, yeah, and the reviewers also need an easy way to review the code, right? So we want to give them as much information as possible upfront. So, then also mentioned the expert groups. Well, those teams, they work on specific topics. We have the SAT team, System Architecture team, which is here for the bold technical strokes. And then we have the individual component teams and the expert groups, expert teams that take care of individual topics. And let me introduce a few of those teams. So there's the App Framework and Security expert group. And this team takes care about the app framework. Remember the overview slide, and security. Yeah. You might say, well, the scope is rather large, which is true. For right now, we concentrate on certain features, yeah, and we don't just create a group for a single topic. So app framework and security. In green, you see the topics which will be worked on for the current cycle, and black is then for the next cycle. So green is for Blowfish, and the bullet points in black are the plan for Chinook. For the UI and the graphics, there's a team that takes care of the compositor, GPU interface, multimedia video, and for the current stable, or for the current cycle, we will add the components in green again. And for the end of the year, for the next release, then we will add the necessary components for browser, speech recognition, navigation. So if you're interested in any of these topics, that's the group to join. For automotive, connectivity will play a major role. So beside the automotive buses at the top, or network and vehicle firewalls, which plays into security, cloud connectivity, and so on, there is one expert group just for those topics. And you see in green and black again what the plan looks like along this year. So first we will deal with the buses and the network, and then we will add functionality around RVI, around smart device link, and so on. Connectivity group, if you're interested in those topics. For enhancing the experience for developers and for making sure everything works together, there's the CI and automated test group, which also helps with the releases. Here we take care about the testing. We improve the infrastructure around the CI. We do daily snapshots already, and upcoming, we will do tests on real hardware. Yeah? So we want each code submission to end up being tested on hardware, yeah, and reported back to the developers in Jared. Yeah? And we will dive also into test environments like JTA. There is also Lava from Linaro, which looks interesting. And that will then help us to add more and more hardware and also add more test suites along the way. So if you're interested in that topic, that's the expert group to join. And now, Dan, back to you.
Thanks, Jan Simon. So this is a shameless plug for Great Linux Foundation events, which is called Automotive Linux Summit. This is an event that we host every year. We've been hosting it. It's a Linux Foundation event, first of all. It's not an AGL event. They're actually independent, but obviously there's a big AGL influence at this event. AGL is a diamond sponsor, which is the highest sponsorship. The next one is in Tokyo, July 13th, 14th, and it's co-located with LinuxCon Japan. Last year we had 230 people attend Automotive Linux Summit, purely Automotive Linux Summit, and of course hundreds more if you count LinuxCon. This year, actually, because of the growth we've seen in Automotive Grade Linux, we're expecting between 300 and 400 people, if not more, at ALS. So this is a great event for both business and technical tracks. There's a lot of technical tracks where engineers get together, talk about automotive stuff. Security is a big issue. There's always a bunch of presentations on security. There's a lot of talks on remote vehicle interactions, over-the-air software upgrades, those kinds of things that are really hot topics right now. So if you can and you're interested, check it out. We would love to see you there at ALS in July. We'll also be showing the demo of the Brilliant Blowfish release that we talked about today. So that's it for our presentation. So we have some time for Q&A. We have about 10 minutes. Yeah? Mm-hmm. Yep.
Hey there. I was wondering, it looks like you have a very, a lot of participation from Japanese companies. And I was wondering, does that interaction work okay? I know a lot of Japanese developers don't speak English. I'm just wondering whether it works or how it works, or any advice you have.
Yeah, so that's a good question, and you're right, it's a little difficult at times. Typically, the lead guy from the companies we deal with, the lead guy who's like the senior architect, if you will, or the senior engineer guy, speaks pretty good English, so that's not been such a problem. The other thing is we have an office in Japan, and we have a guy in Japan that is nearly full-time on AGL. He does other Linux Foundation stuff, but his primary role is AGL. And so he's at every meeting and he helps with translation. We've managed. It's been fine, actually. I think we were concerned, but we're actually working quite nicely and we're making progress. The code is working. And then the other thing we do is we have local Japan-only meetings so that the Japan folks can get together and speak in Japan and in Japanese, and so that they can feel comfortable and make some progress. And then they report out to the larger group. So we do both, and it's worked out quite nicely. Yeah.
Do you think the split between like Japanese developers and English-speaking developers, and I'm sure there's other developers as well in other languages, but is it more heavily weighted one way or the other? Like I know it sounds like the group started in Japan, and I'm wondering, does that mean does there tend to be more Japanese developers, or is it more European developers or whatever?
There's more Japanese developers, no question. The biggest contributors right now, and I don't want to miss anyone, but the Denzos, Panasonic, Toyota, Mazda, Mitsubishi, Hitachi, these companies are the biggest contributors right now, and I'm sure I've missed a bunch. We do have some several European participants. Harman is very active and participating in the project, for example. But predominantly, yes, there's probably 2/3 Japanese, 1/3 the rest of the world, something like that, yeah. And it's really historical, because what happened is, actually, so the founders of AGL were actually, in terms of OEMs, were Toyota and Jaguar Land Rover. So it wasn't really purely Japanese, but Toyota, as you know, is quite influential in the automotive market. They're the biggest manufacturer in the world. And so they got all of their supply chain to support this effort and said, you have to join AGL because that's the future for us. If you don't join AGL, you're not going to get any business from us. And so this is what has caused a lot of the Japanese contingency to participate. But like I said, we're targeting Europe quite a bit. I'm talking to several companies there. We've been told by Continental Automotive that they're joining like imminently, like within the next week or two. They're a big German tier 1 supplier. That'll be huge for us, big accomplishment, and we hope to get more based on that announcement, actually. Any other questions? Yep.
Or competes with Android, because there are rumors Google's working on N version for automotive.
Sure, yeah. So Apple has CarPlay and Android has Android Auto. Both those technologies are display technologies, so they're really projection mode, right? What that means is that there's a two-way protocol. You're projecting what's on your phone to the dashboard, and if you touch something on a dashboard, it tells the phone where it's touching. But it's purely display technology and purely projection mode. You still need a full system in the car. You need a full working infotainment, navigation, you need fan control, you need trip control. You need all those things anyway. So it doesn't really compete because they're really different. And having said that, I'm just going to say it, politically speaking, a lot of car manufacturers don't want to have Android and Apple in their car because they see them as a threat, because there's a lot of rumors that both companies are working on cars, right? Especially Apple lately, a lot of talk about that. So they really see this as an opportunity they see AGL as an opportunity to own and control the software, independent of Apple and Google. And really, they don't want to lose that branding and the relationship that they have with their customers. And because of that, a lot of companies have said, we're just not going to ever have Android and Apple in our cars. And part of the reason this new project exists called Smart Device Link is exactly to counter that, approach. Smart Device Link will allow the same functionality that I described with projection mode, but it'll be app by app specific instead of OS specific. And that project already exists. Smart Device Link is quite advanced, actually. It works today. Ford is the main company behind it. They acquired a company called Livio that developed the technology. And Ford and Toyota at CES this year announced that they were joining forces on this, and they're going to work on Smart Device Link together. So it's got pretty good backing. Any other questions? Yeah, question? Yeah. Oh, back there. Sorry. Yeah.
Thank you.
In a minute.
So I've got a question for CI and automated tests. You said that you are investigating moving to Linaros Lava, and I was wondering whether your plans are to drop JTA entirely or maybe extend it with Lava for test publishing or test result publishing?
So it's not the one or the other. So JTA has a very good list of tests that it supports. Yeah. On the other side, Lava supports multiple boards or board farms. Yeah. So it's a different set of functionality that both supports. So right now I see it more that it's going to use both. Yeah. Just as idea. Yeah. Lava will be responsible for allocating the board, yeah, and JTA is running the tests and reporting back. So it looks like more in that direction. So it's not either or, yeah. So we are basically using the best parts of both.
There's another question here. Yep. Yep.
Sorry. Yeah, I was wondering if you have like standardized hardware, or obviously, I mean, the software has to run on some hardware, and I'm just wondering, are there a lot of different varieties? Is there only one? How is that?
So the initial board we supported, by the way, we want to support real automotive hardware, not some generic board. So the first one we supported was the Renesas R-Car Porter board, which is a real automotive specific board with a CAN bus, all of the stuff, peripherals that you would expect. We're adding NXP, which is, what's the name of the NXP board?
One board, for example.
Yeah, which is an automotive specific board. And then we have the Intel Minomax, and we support QEMU as well, so QEMU. For
TI, the Jacinto is
Oh yeah,
upcoming.
that's right. Yeah, the Jacinto also. Yep. Basically, we'll support any board that anyone wants to help us with. We have no, I mean, we don't care, right? I mean, we care, but anyone that's willing to help us, we'll support their board, no problem. We'll put it in the board farm, we'll put it in the automated test infrastructure. All we ask is that they support us in terms of the BSP and in terms of getting the board up and running, and that they keep supporting us when we hit, snags. What's cool though, and just to make a point on that, a lot of these boards are very close to what the final product is going to be. Now they're reference boards, obviously, and the manufacturer always asks for this feature, that feature, and they'll customize the board for the manufacturer, but they're very close. Like the Renesas R-Car is close to what the final product is going to be, so a lot of the device drivers and just the board support package just will work out of the box, which is really cool.
If I may, I've got two more questions about CI and automated tests. I was wondering whether current test suites, are they run on some kind of emulator? Because if I understood correctly, tests on real hardware will be in middle of this year. And I'm curious whether you just do build tests or you emulate your hardware currently.
So at the moment, the infrastructure reports the build back. Yeah. So right now it's a build test. In the queue is tests in QEMU, and then with the, for example, Lava or JTA tests on hardware. There is, so we demonstrated the JTA already for the Porter board, but we are now moving that into a production setup, which means we have to replace components in JTA, upref it because it's using an ancient Jenkins version. We need to upref it to a recent one, and so on. So that is in the pipe. Yeah.
Will the new automated test setup be available only for DB release, or maybe someone could take a look at, I don't know, maybe a staging area for AGL?
So if it's just for the release, so right now it is bound for the AGL folder, so kind of the AGL distribution. Once we have kind of the JTA plus board farm and so on in place, we plan to expand that. But at the moment, it's just the distribution part that's being checked. It's just volume right now. If we would do that for every commit in staging, we don't have the infrastructure in the backend right now. But the plan is to give the developers as soon as possible feedback, yeah, to sustain the rapid development. If a developer has to, well, set up 20 different boards, that just wouldn't scale, yeah. So that's why we have that in the as planned. Yeah.
I think we have time for one more question. One last question, anyone? Oh, one at the back. Yep.
So I've worked with some of the OEMs in the past, and one of their biggest concerns is GPL version 3, specifically having the customer modify any of the software on the vehicle. Do you guys have a strategy for dealing with that, or is that still up to the OEM to figure out what they're willing to accept?
Yeah, so our approach to that is we're an open source project. So to be honest, I think some manufacturers may have concerns, but it's up to them to deal with it. It's up to them and their suppliers. If they, you know, for whatever reason want to take some of that code out, that's up to them. We're not dealing with that. We don't have a policy on that. We're building code, and some of it may be GPL v3. And
Well, we give them the tools, and in Yocto they can apply their whitelists.
I suspect some manufacturers will have some, you know, issues with it and may, you know, do what they need to do, but the open source project, we're not concerned with it. Yeah. Yep. What's that? You're all GPL, all the code you guys write is GPL v3? No, not necessarily. It's a whole bunch of different licenses. Depends, I mean, there's a lot of components, as you can imagine. And depending on the component, some of it's not GPL at all. It's different licenses. Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you very much, everyone. Thanks for coming.